Hello, and welcome to today's webinar titled Interactive Content Hack, 5 Ways to Add Interactivity to Your Marketing Mix. I'm Brian Anderson, News Editor of Demand Gen Report, and I'll be your moderator for this presentation. Today's webinar will shine light on how to add interactivity to your content marketing mix to pique buyer interest, drive engagement, and boost conversion rates. This is the final session in our week-long campaign optimization series, where we've covered a variety of trends and strategies to fine-tune and enhance your B2B marketing campaigns. Be sure to check out the rest of the webinars in the series, all of which are available on demand. I also want to encourage you to follow along and share your thoughts and feedback during today's webinar on social media using the hashtag #COSeries. You can connect with us using the @DG_report Twitter account, or reach out to us directly. My Twitter handle is G3Brian. I'd also like to note that this is the last session for attendees to increase their chances of winning a free ticket to our annual Content to Conversion Conference, taking place in Scottsdale, Arizona next February. Attendees earn 1 entry into the lottery when they register for a session, and the second entry if they attend the session live. The 5th and final winner will be announced this afternoon, so best of luck to all of you. For those of you who may be new to Demand Gen Report, here's a quick overview. We are an online media company publishing daily news, a weekly email newsletter, special reports, original research, and a rich menu of additional resources. In addition, we produce the annual Content to Conversion and Demand Gen Summit, located in Scottsdale, Arizona. If you haven't done so already, please join more than 40,000 subscribers to our weekly newsletter by subscribing to Demand Gen Report today. For today's presentation, we're using the On24 platform. During the presentation, you can access all the information you need from the platform toolbar. We encourage you to ask our presenters questions. To do so, simply click the Q&A widget at the top right corner of the screen. Today's session is being recorded, and all attendees will receive an archive link to the presentation to go back and review or share with your colleagues. Before I introduce our featured speakers, one last housekeeping note. Today's presentation is slated to run about 20 to 30 minutes with 10 minutes for Q&A following the presentation. Be sure to submit your questions using the Q&A widget in the On24 console. Now I'm pleased to introduce our featured speakers for today's presentation, Dana Harder and Alicia Fiorletta. As VP of Client Strategy, Dana Harder helps B2B marketers turn their marketing organizations into demand gen rock stars. That means helping content for demand clients build and refine their content strategy, all corresponding content and even their demand gen efforts. When she's not helping her clients build a consistent and scalable content strategy, she's doing yoga, meditating, dyeing her hair an awesome shade of pink, or cheering on her son at the hockey rink. Alicia Fiorletta is a content strategist for Content for Demand. In addition to writing for and managing the C4D blog, she helps clients identify new content marketing ideas and experiment with innovative formats. Alicia is a fan of all things digital and interactive and uses the art of ideation to help clients see all the content marketing possibilities. When she's not dwelling over all things branding, messaging, and content strategy, she's spending quality time with her nieces and nephews, binging on Netflix, or eating guacamole. Without further ado, I'll turn things over to you, Alicia.
Thank you much, Brian, for that great introduction, and thanks to everyone out there for listening today. Welcome to our interactive content hack. As marketers and demand creators, I'm sure you've been hearing a lot about the power of interactive lately. You may be new to these content formats, or you have been experimenting for some time. Regardless of where you are in your journey in terms of leveraging and experimenting with interactive content. Our goal today is to provide you with a few quick tips and best practices to help you get the most value out of your interactive content investments, whether they're big or whether they're small. So before we dive into the content, let's take a step back first and take a look at our team. Now, you may have some or all of these characters in your organization, and regardless, they all play a role in your jobs as marketers and could potentially impact how you perceive and approach your content and campaigns. Let's start with Bill Lumberg. You all may know Bill, for better or for worse. He always thinks his way is the right way, the best way, and of course always tries to push a lot of last-minute work on his colleagues and always tries to push up those deadlines. Then there's our good friend Milton Wadhams. The running joke about Milton is that he's a bit of a pushover. All right, well, a lot of a pushover. He does his job, he stays quiet, and he does what he's told, doesn't ask any questions. That is, unless someone steals his stapler. Then there's friends of Peter Gibbons, Michael and Samir, and they help him perform an ultimate hack into their company system because, to put it bluntly, they're just sick and tired of the way things are today. And finally, there's Peter Gibbons, the anti-hero and the rebel of The Office. If you know this story that these characters belong to Office Space, you know that he's very unhappy with the way things are, and he wants them to change. He feels stuck in a rut and wants to break free from monotony. Without going into too much detail, he gets hypnotized, he changes his entire outlook on life, and before you know it, he's trying to hack into his company system. And, well, hopefully you know the rest, and we don't have to get into too much detail. Now, I know what you may be thinking, or what you may be asking in this case. What exactly are you getting at here? What are you trying to say? Are we encouraging you to cause anarchy within your organization? No. And, of course, we're not encouraging you to slack off like Peter did because you just don't care anymore. And finally, most importantly, we're definitely not encouraging you to hack into your company system and to steal money from them. This is a cautionary tale of sorts, cautionary tale of characters, and if anything, we're encouraging you to not be like any of these team members. We're encouraging you to break free from the status quo and take charge by performing, in this case, an interactive content hack. Now you may be asking why. Why is change needed? Because your buyers are changing. Although they're relying on content more than ever before, they also have access to more content than ever before, right? It's a big back and forth, big conflict that we're facing as marketers today. There's so much content, in fact, that they're getting inundated by all of the information that they're receiving through your nurture campaigns, social media outreach, search, and of course the myriad of other digital channels out there. As adults, their content preferences are changing. Since they're receiving the same cycle of ebooks, white papers, and infographics, buyers are looking for a change in the content that they're receiving. They're looking for shorter, more interactive, and visual content. Most importantly, they want content that can scale to their mobile devices. They're always on the go, they're not chained to their desks anymore, so they want to have seamless, anytime, anywhere access to content and information. All of the data on this slide and the coming slides are from Demand Gen Reports and Content for Demand's Content Preferences Survey, which provided a lot of really valuable insights about the mindset of today's buyer, their content consumption habits, their preferences, and this has really opened our eyes to a lot of the trends and new imperatives for content marketing. So supporting the point I just mentioned about your buyers wanting anytime, anywhere access to content, they also want content creators like ourselves to make it faster and easier for them to access that content. And that means making forms shorter, packaging relevant content together, and making assets more digestible, actionable, and of course easy to digest. As you know, their to-do lists are longer, their minds are a little scattered, so it's really important, more important than ever in fact, that we provide actionable information and insights that allow them to do their jobs better. So all of this background information is really the underlying foundation for our interactive content hack. After all, the primary goal for any marketer is to create content that aligns with our buyers' behaviors, preferences, content consumption habits, and this really should encourage us as marketers to be a little rebellious, to break the status quo traditional content marketing rules. At this point in the game, your buyers want you to. So with that, here's a quick snapshot at the 5 hacks that we'll be going through today. As I noted a little earlier, that underlying foundation to creating really compelling, memorable, interactive content is having a really strong foundation that hinges around knowing your buyer and what they really want out of the content experience, from the data that you include, the visuals you include, and of course, the key points and takeaways and insights that only you and your brand can share. So we're going to be walking through these, and to kick things off, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dana, and she's going to be talking more about aligning format decisions and messaging to your buyer.
Thank you so much, Alicia, and thanks for everyone for joining today. So it's a great setup. I love Office Space, and I think it's a great comparison that we don't want our content to become this status quo, this mundane thing that's just going day after day. And with all the content that's coming at people, I think it's a really important thing to stress, that we have to keep things interesting. But at the same time, we have to make sure that while we've got to make things interesting and break out of the box and the traditional content we've been creating, we still have to make sure that we're laying the right foundation. And while we're going to talk later on about how creating interactive content is different than traditional content, laying the foundation remains very much the same as when we're doing traditional content. So, we still need to start with a solid foundation. And I know if you've sat in any of our webinars before, this is something we talk about over and over again. And the reason we do is because it's core to everything you do with your content marketing strategy. Is we have to know our buyer. Because if we don't know if we're creating the right kind of content. So while interactive is gaining in popularity, there's a lot of momentum around it right now. There's a lot of cool tools and platforms out there for us to look at. The reality is that it's not for every buyer. It's not for every stage of the buyer's journey. And if you know who your buyers are and you take the time to get to know them and understand their content preferences, deciding where and when and how to use interactive content is going to be that much easier. So make sure that we get to know our buyers again. Don't let this slide. Use those insights to make sure that you're deciding on the right format. Look at their content preferences. Look at their watering holes. And then make sure that messaging that you're going to tailor it to that buyer, and then that messaging is being pulled throughout the content. So, we've got the buyer, we've got the messaging. You have to align it to the buyer's journey. And you're going to find as you start to learn more about the different types of interactive content, there's going to be some that align better to your different messages that you've developed and to the different stages of the buyer's journey better than others. So don't forget your foundation as we go through this hack and this process. Laying this foundation is important no matter what kind of content you're creating. And if you do the work up front, the investments you make in any kind of content is going to pay off tenfold. Okay, so now that we have the foundation, now we can get into the fun stuff. What technology is out there, and what kinds of things can we do with interactive content? Alicia down the line is going to talk about ways that you can add interactive elements to content. So it's more think of little bite-sized ways that we can add it. But this section here, we're going to talk about what technology exists to help us create this really cool interactive stuff that everybody's seeing these days. So there is a wealth of tools out there. There's so many to choose from. And, you know, I'll talk about a few today, but I want to say that by no means is this comprehensive, right? There are so many tools out there and so many different cool things you can do these days with interactive content. So the question is, how do I choose? How am I going to decide which ones are for me? The reality is these tools are expensive. Just like content, the tools themselves to create this interactive content is going to be an investment. So whichever tools you pick, you're going to have to make sure that it's going to serve a purpose, that, that you've got what you need to integrate into your marketing automation system. Does it integrate? Does it integrate into any other technology and tools that you have? Can the scoring work? You know, the data I'm going to gather from these tools, and there is some really great consumption data you're going to get from these tools that are going to be valuable. You know, can I get all of that, and can I get into my marketing automation and other content management platforms? What am I going to create the most of? If my buyers aren't reading quizzes, I probably don't want an interactive quiz or assessment tool, right? But maybe they love ebooks, so maybe a flipbook platform is more right for me. So, and I'm going to put all of the content I have in there. So making sure that whatever you purchase, you're going to use. And you're going to use it across the organization. Break down those silos and, you know, say I'm going to use ebooks here and I'm going to use it in my content marketing, but can other divisions of the company use this in other capacities that makes the investment more easier to bite off on when we make that decision? And then what value are these tools going to provide short and long term? Like I said, there is some incredible consumption data that's available on how people are using content. If they tie into your map, it's going to help me score. You know, so there's lots of value that these tools provide, and deciding what it is and what it's going to do for you is going to be really important. All right, so the first technology we're going to talk about are flipbooks and different flipbook experiences. So cool thing about flipbooks is it gives you the idea that I'm still reading an ebook or a white paper or a book and I'm flipping through it. I have control of the experience and I'm flipping the pages of the book. There are platforms like Uberflip and Nextbook, and Ein Interactive does a format of this. So there's definitely some cool flipbook technologies out there that allow you to do this. We tend to see these more for what I would call the traditional content experience, ebooks, white papers, you know, checklists, Q&As, best practice guides, things that are a little longer in nature, but you know, you still want to provide some interactive elements. There's cool things that you can do here with one-click socials. So I can do a click-to-tweet button in these interactive tools. I can link to other assets. I can do video. I can do podcasts. So the goal of these is that I can add other interactive links in here and still give somebody the feeling that I'm in an ebook or a white paper. The great thing is the reporting that you're going to see in the back end, and I'll show you that in a further slide. So flipbooks are a great way. Nextbook, I should mention, even allows you to do some animation. So that's kind of taking it to the next level. So interactive infographics are kind of the new hot thing right now. They can be built a couple of ways. There are platforms out there like Theros. I believe that Ein Interactive also can do some interactive infographic type work and animated type fields. These can also be created in basic HTML5. So, you know, if you've got a coder or that expertise within your organization, these can be coded and created in-house. You don't necessarily have to have a tool. However, the tool does allow you to do it faster, a little bit quicker, and probably lends itself to some reporting and animations and stuff that make it really complex when you're doing it straight HTML5. But it can be done. So I don't want people to get hung up on that I have to purchase a piece of technology to create this really cool stuff. So these interactive infographics, and we can make some links available after the webinar where you can actually see the experience, because I know we're static right now in an interactive presentation, but they scroll up and down like an infographic. The one on the right here, the growing appetite for content, actually feels more flipbook-like, and I actually feel, or SlideShare-like, I should feel that I'm going to actually click left to right as the experience. So personalized videos are becoming kind of a cool thing to keep an eye out for. And, you know, this is a way of how do I take a video that I'm creating and personalize it. We know that personalization is important. We know that, you know, the more I can make somebody feel like we know them when I'm delivering my content, the better chance I have of getting them to open and hopefully converting them to take the content. So Vidyard has these personalized videos that literally allows you to customize the name in there. So where it says B2B marketer, we actually could insert my name, Dana. So when it goes to me, it inserts it at certain aspects of the video. There are different elements that can be personalized. So it's a really cool way to give personalization to an interactive tool, right? And something that we traditionally think I wouldn't be able to do without seriously creating thousands of different versions of the video. So some really neat technologies out there right now. Quizzes and assessments. So this is another thing that I think, you know, there's some great platforms out there. Ion Interactive, SnapMap allows you to do quizzes. I believe there's one called Quizzer that also allows you to do this. But, you know, using quizzes and assessments to help drive people into your nurture. Again, these can also be created in HTML5. So if you don't have a platform, there are workarounds. If you have somebody with coding experience or have an agency you work with who's got that background, or even somebody, if you've got a freelancer, these things can be created in HTML5. So you can balance the technology with internal resources. But using quizzes, top of the funnel, using them to lead into other content, or using them at the back end of content, taking an infographic or an interactive infographic, and once they see the stats, asking them, hey, how do I stack up, and lead them into a quiz. So just another way to take interactive to the next level. And then just overall custom interactive content. We're seeing some really cool things out here. The one on the left here, the Holiday Marketing Success Calendar that a client of ours created, that we created with them, and they won an award at the Killer Content Awards at Content to Conversion this year for this. It's a great piece because it not only combines interactive, but it combines repurposing. So I'll talk about that a little bit more in the repurpose section. The other thing is calculators. Savings calculators, ROI calculators, cost savings calculators. Any of these kinds of tools that you can think of can be created in HTML5 and really lend themselves to a different experience in your email and demand gen efforts. So last slide, why, you know, I mean, outside of the experience, right? We know people want interactive. They want to view it on mobile. They want all of these things to make us feel we're on the go all the time, and all of these wonderful experiences on the front end that your customer having are great, right? That is the wonderful part about interactive. But the metrics that you're going to get, this is what really differs from static content. So when you serve me up a standard infographic or a standard white paper, and I fill out the form, and I go ahead and I take the content, it goes into my downloads folder. I don't know if somebody read it. I don't know if they ever went back in there and looked. So what I do know is that when I am using an interactive platform, whichever it may be, I'm going to get redirected to a URL. That URL opens my browser, and it's right in my face. So not only is the content right there for me, and I'm looking at it, I'm going to track everything you do within that content. So now I have this whole wealth of data that tells me how a user used my content. Did they make it past page 5? What was the average time spent on page? Did they click on my embedded video and my click to tweet buttons? Did they listen to that podcast, and how long did they listen to it for? All of this data. All of a sudden I have this, And so now it helps me develop smarter content. And I think that's the one thing we're all trying to do as marketers is how do I create better, smarter content that my prospects and leads and clients are all actually reading and using. So just one of the great benefits of all of these technology platforms, all of them are slightly different. They don't all go into that depth, but for the most part, interactive content is going to lend you to data that you didn't previously have with traditional content. Okay, so this leads me into repurpose and reversioning. One of the easiest and quickest ways to get to interactive content is use what you already have. Again, if you've been on any of our webinars, we are big believers in repurposing content. More and more we talk to marketers in the space and some of our clients. You guys have huge content libraries. If you've been doing this for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, you have content available to you, and you've invested in it. You've invested in time. You've invested it on a financial side, and this still is viable in a lot of cases. So one of the things that I would say is to start with what you have. Take a look at your content and make sure that what you've got, it can be, see if it can be turned into something more interactive. So, you know, if you haven't done so already and you have some content, do the audit. I know it's painful. I know it's not that much fun, but audit your content. Take a look and see, what do I have existing? Do I have any ebooks that can be, maybe as is, they can be loaded into a Flipbook platform and I can add some clips to tweets and bam, I have interactive content. Is there an infographic data that lives within an ebook that can be pulled out and made into an interactive? Or do I just have a static infographic that can be made interactive? So, you know, I say to take a look at what you have, audit it, and make a note in your audit that, yes, this can be repurposed easily, and I think it lends itself to an interactive format. Just by doing that, you're going to be amazed at the opportunities you uncover for yourself. And you aren't starting over then on every piece of interactive content. It's also a great way just to try out some formats and see if they work before you invest in a whole new piece. Do I have something existing? And can I just change it up enough, make it interactive, and then let's see if interactive infographics play well with my audience. Okay, so here's just a good sample. So we took last year's content preferences study, and we made an interactive infographic, this growing appetite for content. So as I said, we'll make this available in the hub, or we'll send this out via email. But you can see how we went from a research report into an interactive infographic. So just another way to think about things I already have and how we can make them interactive. All right, this is that piece I was referring to earlier, and I wanted to talk about it in more detail here. This piece was a great example of repurposing. They have tons, this client, Cox Media, had a good amount of content, and they decided to put just a new wrapper on it, a new interactive wrapper. And essentially what they did is they took existing content and they served up in a holiday calendar, think Advent calendar experience, and they served up a new piece of content every day. What's so great about that is the content they're serving up, some of it was static content. Some of it's interactive, but some of it was just content I had laying around. It was checklists and ebooks and white papers. The interactive component of this is the wrapper. It's the experience of going to the site and every day seeing a new piece of content unlocked, and then on the back end being sent an email that, hey, your new piece of content is ready and I can go check it out. So it doesn't always have to be, I'm taking a piece of content, making it interactive. I can put a new wrapper on something and give it an interactive feel. All right, so I hope that we gave you some great examples of technologies and ways to use what you have. And now I'm going to let Alicia continue the conversation here, and I'm going to turn it back over to her.
All right, thanks so much, Dana. I think you shared a lot of really powerful examples and reasons why repurposing and reversioning existing content is a great way to, of course, get more value out of the content you already have, but experiment with different interactive approaches and, of course, seeing what resonates with buyers. It's beneficial for a number of reasons. It takes less time to update something than to create something from scratch, and it's a little more cost efficient. And of course, since it's content that's already approved and may be up on your website or being promoted or is part of a nurture campaign, it's already approved. So you kind of went through all those steps already. So what we're saying is, try and take advantage of all of that content that you already have in-house. Of course, there will be times where you don't want to fully update your content for an interactive experience, or you may already have a solid piece of interactive content already, and you just want to generate more awareness, drive more eyes and traffic to these pieces. So that's why I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about, why integrating interactive elements into existing content can be valuable not only for yourself as a marketer, in terms of capturing buyer attention, but it's also good for your buyer too, in terms of their overall content experience and content journey. So of course, before we dig too deep into an example and the process, let's go over the why. Non-surprisingly, a lot of the benefits kind of align with the value of repurposing and reversioning content. It's a more hassle-free experience to come up with calls to action or call-outs to promote existing content rather than creating new content from scratch. It takes less manpower and less money, to get more people involved and to create new content. And the one thing I do want to call out, of course, is that it really adds more power and pizzazz, I guess you would say, to your existing content. As Dana kind of noted about the value of flipbooks, sometimes the static ebook experience is something that your buyers want, that there's a familiar feeling that comes with it and they enjoy it. But adding a interactive call out or even click to tweet functionality can really have a significant impact on buyer engagement. So let's go through the process, and this is just a three-step process to help you get started. But we're also going to show how we integrated interactive elements into one of our graphic ebooks or Gbooks on modular content. The first step, of course, laying that foundation, is to identify your core objectives. Who's your target audience? What stage of the buyer's journey are you targeting? And what are the key takeaways that you're trying to communicate to your buyer? Just to show how we brought these tactics and best practices to life, in this case, we wanted to provide some educational insights on the value of modular content, how it benefits marketers and B2B brands, and how marketers can build a modular content strategy and arsenal. Because a lot of the content in the Gbook was very high level and educational, our interactive elements highlighted supporting research or a deeper look into the how-to elements. But of course, there were also examples of how we used modular content to accelerate the content creation process. So it was kind of a win-win for us in that regard. And on this page, hopefully you can see, we spotlighted the benefits of modular content, that it allows marketers to meet buyers' insatiable appetite for content. So of course, the supporting sidebar shows an interactive infographic highlighting data points from the B2B content preferences survey. And I think this really ties nicely to our next step, and this is something that we really encourage our clients to think about, and that's find your rabbit holes. If you don't know what rabbit holes are, they're basically connecting points in your content that focus on a supplementary topic or takeaway. It's a call to action to another piece of content, so buyers can seamlessly continue on their journey, but still stay connected to your brand. So rather than finding a data point and being like, oh, hey, where's that from, and trying to Google it, or saying, oh, hey, that's an interesting topic or trend, let me do another search on that. You're providing everything your buyer needs in that moment to continue their educational process, their learning process. And even better, you have control over the content that they have access to. So it really makes your brand top of mind during that process. So as you're trying to identify your rabbit holes, try and pinpoint topics in your content, as you go through the creation process. that may be explained in more detail, identify follow-up questions that your buyers may have while they're reading the content. And of course, always think about the action that you want your buyers to take after they finish reading your content. So again, let's go to our example of the modular content Gbook that we created. So we included a rabbit hole in a section focused on how marketers can create a modular content strategy, the process. And although we focused on like the high-level best practices and some takeaways, we embedded a clip from a webinar we hosted focused on how marketers can get more value out of modular content, and of course it went into more detail. So again, it's all related to the same topic, but that rabbit hole adds a little more depth to the conversation. And finally, I have to bring this up. Be creative. Use fun visuals to draw your buyers in. Of course, we want to think about rabbit holes. We want to be strategic. We want to educate our buyers, accelerate the buyer's journey. But you're not really going to get the attention that you deserve unless you put a fun spin on it. Use fun visuals. Come up with supporting themes that capture buyers' eyes and make learning a new trend or best practice a little easier for them. And of course, data is always your friend. As you can see, we always use data to support our interactive content and our rabbit holes, so that's always something to keep in mind. And for this Gbook that we created, we empowered our readers that access the modular content piece to better understand those B2B buyer trends and content consumption habits by including some interactive call-outs and calls to action to provide more data on those trends and behaviors. So again, this is supposed to be a very quick and actionable piece, so we didn't want to inundate them with a lot of data. So we had one call-out, and then if folks wanted to learn more, they could easily click and continue on that journey. And to close off our presentation today, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up promoting and amplifying interactive content across channels, and of course using interactive and more visual elements. As you all know, promotion is imperative. There's no point in creating content unless you can effectively share it with your current customers and target buyers, and of course, that they see and share it as well. And Dana and I have spoken a little bit about social already, so I won't go too deep into this, but just a reminder about the power of social sharing capabilities. So some best practices always include social sharing elements and content assets. Of course, Twitter is the most popular. And another best practice is to always pre-populate tweets to enable seamless sharing. Make it easier for your buyers. Include a data point or a key takeaway, and include a bit.ly link, of course, to go to the landing page to download the full asset, because that kind of generates that social word of mouth that everyone's always after. And always include Twitter handles, hashtags, just so you can better track those social sharing behaviors. And of course, like their comment, retweet, comment on it, continue that conversation. So this is one example that C4D did on a research report. This is a good example because there was a lot of powerful data in there. So we used a lot of social sharing to generate word of mouth around some of those takeaways. So we included a click to tweet button. And then as you can see, when you click that, that Twitter button in the call out, there's a pre-populated tweet. So all you really have to do is tweet in that moment or add it to your buffer, your Hootsuite account, whatever you may have. And now I want to talk a little bit about modular content. So, when you're creating interactive content, especially, you're always going to have a lot of powerful images or visuals that you use throughout your piece. So one thing to really keep in mind is how you can break down those visual elements and, use them for your promotion, to generate awareness through social, through email, through your blogs, images, GIFs, calls to action. They always play an important role in a really powerful social strategy. So if you're If you have a design team that is in charge of this, that's great. But then there are also really great tools like Canva available that have a lot of powerful drag and drop functionality and have templates already created for you, so you can easily, customize your own images and share them with your team. So here's one example on the C4D blog. Since we create so much content throughout the week, and we always try to post something and then instantly share it on social. So tools like Canva and of course modular content play a really important role. So here's an example of one blog piece that we kind of broke down. So there's the initial image. And then we created a supporting social image that had, of course, the featured photo in the background, and then included some statistics that were included in the blog piece. And finally, I think it's important to note that it's time for us as marketers to rethink traditional promotional channels such as email and, of course, landing pages. So everyone is doing email. I don't need to share a lot of data around that. It's pretty obvious at this point. So standing out is becoming even more difficult. Don't get stuck in the same approach for your emails. We usually follow a same formula, right, for our messaging. Try experimenting with customized calls to action, include personalized greetings and subject lines. I know Dana touched on how powerful personalization can be. Even try embedding photos, videos, GIFs. When it comes to email, the value is that you have a engaged database at your disposal to test and learn. So test these different elements, see how your buyers respond, and then refine your approach accordingly. So this is one email that Content for Demand sent out when we released our co-branded content preferences survey. We decided to have a little fun with it, and this is something that you guys can try too if it suits your audience. We included a GIF from 30 Rock featuring Alec Baldwin. Our primary goal was to show that buyers have, lower attention spans, that they want something more interactive, more compelling. So we found a GIF that relates to that and had really short, concise messaging. So that's something to always keep in mind as well. Always get to the point. Let the visuals speak for themselves. And then also try to experiment with your CTA buttons, even changing from download the report to download now to get your copy. Who knows, you may discover something new about what really drives your buyers to take action. And finally, it's time to rethink how you use landing pages. As I noted earlier in the presentation, your buyers want faster, easier access to content. No one wants to fill out 10 fields of personal information every time they download one of your pieces. Talk about a turnoff. So try and experiment with different form lengths, depending on the content type. Try and send automatic downloads to your subscribers as a strong value add, or try experimenting with content toolkits. We did a whole campaign around repurposing, and at the end, we created a dedicated hub or toolkit so our subscribers could easily look at our menu of content and download the assets that they wanted or were most relevant to them. And of course, it doesn't have to always align to a specific theme. It could be quarterly, it could be seasonal. We also experimented with a holiday-themed toolkit, right around the time people were starting to break for the holidays. So try to have some fun with it. It helps generate a little more awareness, shows your buyers that you're willing to try new things, and most importantly, you want to get the best content in front of them. So we covered a lot of information today, but hopefully it provided you with some actionable steps you can take to either start embracing interactive content or help you refine your strategies. Just a quick recap, be sure you have your content foundation in place, whether it's interactive or static. Understand your buyers' content preferences, their job roles, their pain points, and tailor your messaging not only to their needs, but to those different stages of the buyer's journey. The audit is your best friend. Conduct a content audit to see if and how you can use the assets you already have, or how you can update your existing content for new interactive formats. And of course, see how you can integrate that existing content into new interactive pieces to extend the life of your content arsenal. Finally, rethink your promotional strategies. Experiment with email, landing pages, try different approaches, compelling visual banners, GIFs. Again, there are so many different fun approaches out there. So, it's really up to you to kind of test and learn and see what resonates with your buyers. And hopefully that'll empower you to make smarter decisions down the line. And finally, one final thing I do want to call out, think mobile optimized. Again, we were talking about how more buyers are using their smartphones and their tablets to access content, so that's always something to keep in mind. So mobile optimized, think quick, actionable, snackable, and of course interactive. And that's the real value of interactive, right? Even though it's fun, it's cool, it's interesting, but these interactive content platforms and formats really align with all of these changing buyer needs and preferences. So hopefully this provides you with a really good baseline of things to consider, ideas to bring back to your team. We don't want you to be like this guy on the screen right now. We don't want you to struggle to come up with fun and interesting content ideas. It's such an exciting time in our industry, and there are so many tools out there to help you along the way that we know you just kind of need the inspiration and the ideas to kick things off. So hopefully our presentation helped today. And thanks out there again for listening. If you have any questions, Dana's information and my information is on the screen right now. And of course, if you have any questions during the Q&A segment, definitely let us know. So with that, Brian, I'm going to let you come on in, and then hopefully we have some questions from the audience.
Thank you, Dana and Alicia. That was a really great presentation. We received a lot of great questions from attendees, so I think we should get on into it and answer some of those now. The first question is from Jim, and Jim is wondering, is there anything else he needs to consider before he decides to reuse or repurpose his existing content?
I can take that, Brian. I think if you do a true audit on content, and we always talk about a difference between an audit and a content inventory. But when we audit content, we look at things like evergreen score. Is it still viable today? Is there a bunch of stats and content that are outdated and the piece is no longer viable in the marketplace? We look at the age of the content and how old it is. So, when you're repurposing and deciding, it's because putting it into interactive is going to require some sort of investment, whether you have the internal resources and the time or you're going to have to outsource it. Making sure that the content you're repurposing or reusing and putting into some sort of interactive format, that it's current, it's got good legs to stand on still, and that it's going to be, we always say, a good repurposing score. And for us, that means that I don't have to do a lot of work to repurpose it into something else. That the information I need, the content in itself is still good, and I can lift from it and create another asset. So those are some of the things that I would look at, when you're looking at or deciding whether an asset is good to repurpose.
Yeah, it looks like there's definitely different angles to look at when it comes to your existing content. When it comes to the second question, is from Leanne. She asks, do you have any additional tips or best practices for selecting the right interactive formats for target buyers?
Knowing your persona, as I said, was the most important. I think that the outside of that, the best thing is really just testing. And Alicia mentioned that earlier, but even if you've done the research and you know this is your persona and this is what they're looking for from a content perspective, don't go hog wild and be like, okay, all I'm doing is creating interactive content. I'm going to create 10 quizzes and 5 Uber flips or whatever it is that you're doing. Take the time, do one, and test it out and see if there's a difference in your conversions between the static PDF or the static content and the new interactive piece. And then test another format out or however you're going to do it. But, take it baby steps. I would say with all of this stuff is, try it out, test it. If it doesn't work, try something new. But don't find yourself with 100 pieces of interactive content that nobody's using.
Right. Great. The third question comes from Christopher. Chris asks, he says that he's new to this whole interactive thing, and he's wondering how can he get started without inundating himself or his team.
Dana, I can take this one. I think it's a really great question because I think Dana actually kind of alluded to this in her last response that, if you're trying to get buy-in from, your team members and maybe even your manager, and you have this really aggressive plan to do all these interactive content campaigns, and you need to implement all these tools and technologies, it gets to be a little jarring, right? So I think it's best to start small. Of course, once you decide whether interactive is right for your target buyer, start by either one, repurposing an existing piece. I think starting out by taking something like an infographic and adding interactive elements is a good way to start off because a lot of those visual elements are already in place. Those photos are developed by your design team. There's a whole brand story there. It's just a matter of identifying which interactive elements you're going to be using. I would say that would be a good way to start. And then, of course, click-to-tweet functionality is an interactive element that you can easily add. There are tools and platforms available where you can create those direct links to pre-embed those tweets. So those are just two ideas, and of course, trying to integrate interactive callouts or embedding videos or even webinar clips into a shorter static piece of written content like an ebook or a brief is also a good way to add some interactive flair to your content without fully investing, in a huge, platform investment or, planning all of these big projects. So those are just a few ideas.
Yeah, they seem like great ways to, get Chris's foot in the door when it comes to interactive content. The last question is from Susan, and she's wondering if there are any other emerging content trends or cool formats that she should be taking note of when it comes to her marketing strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can add to this, and then Dana, if you have any closing statements or if I missed anything, feel free to jump in. But there are some really interesting takeaways from the Content Preferences Survey. One thing was that more buyers are looking for audio content, that they can access, on demand or using any device. And this kind of ties to some of the winning content campaigns that we saw from the Killer Content Awards from C2C. We saw a lot of different types of B2B brands experimenting with podcasts. Whether it's a one-off, podcast series that takes place every few weeks or once a month. And then others were experimenting with full-on serialized podcasts, that had a storyline and characters. So I definitely think that's something to watch out for, and it's actually pretty, it seems like a pretty seamless format that you can experiment with. You can start off doing one podcast a month, and then see how your buyers respond, how it impacts social shares, overall interest, etc. And then you can always scale up from there. So I would say that's one thing to look out for. And then the other format that I think is highly effective and that we're seeing a lot of our clients have interest in is what we call iPapers, but they're designed using HTML5, so they're mobile optimized. They scale for all devices, which again is really important. But then it's almost like a dedicated website for your content, so you can make it as interactive or aesthetic as you'd like. It can just be a standard scrolling experience, or you can include dynamic backgrounds for different sections. You can have animated callouts. You can include click-to-tweet functionality. You can embed videos. So it's a really dynamic format and approach that allows you to include as much or as little interactive content elements as you want. but again, you know, it really allows you to create a seamless experience for your buyers, and it's really conducive for creating those rabbit holes, right? Because you can easily embed different pieces of content easily, you know, without making it seem like a cluttered mess. So those are the two that really stick out to me right now.
Yeah, and Alicia, I would add on to that. I think, you know, we're hearing a lot in the space about listicles, right, which is the BuzzFeed, you know, equivalent to that list kind of feel of, so it's kind of the in-between infographic list and things. But in the B2B world, right, we all needed a little more polish, given where we're coming from. So we're finding that the platform, or the iPaper platform, this idea that it's web-based, gives you that feel of a BuzzFeed type listicle, and so we can do those, you know, through HTML5 as well. So, you know, they're really similar assets, but it's amazing what we can do with HTML5 overall in terms of creating interactive content. So I don't want to say that it's better than all of the wonderful, all of the interactive tools that are out there, because that's not the case. I mean, you're not getting the same reporting. You know, there's definitely benefits to using them and ease of doing that. So I don't want to say one is better than the other. I think both of them have their places, and both have a fit for depending on what kind of organization you are and what your budgets are and all of that. So, you know, it's just different alternatives based on where you're at in your content marketing journey.
Yep, great point.
Awesome. Thanks again to Dana Harder and Alicia Fioletta from Content for Demand for sharing such great insights. And thank you to all our attendees for taking the time to join us today. As a reminder, today's webinar, as well as all of the other sessions that took place throughout the week, are available on demand, so you can access it and all the other content at any time and share it with your peers and colleagues by following the link you see on the screen here. One last note, while the campaign optimization series has come to a close, we're happy to announce our third annual Lead Lifecycle series. The week-long event, which is slated for July, will focus on how B2B marketers are improving their contribution and influence on revenue by enhancing their lead scoring frameworks, their lead nurturing strategies, and their lifecycle marketing best practices. If you'd like to receive updates as speakers and topics are announced, follow the link here to sign up. We hope to see you there. Thank you again for taking the time to join us today, and have a great rest of the day.